Hey everyone, welcome to Gorge Views Hockey Niagara. This is going to be a 4-part series. In each part, we're going to feature a totally different hawk. We'll also have a recap and intro segment. This is part of that. We'll go into eBird and how we can use it to help ourselves in Niagara, and by so doing, also help the world. We're also going to get into ecotourism. All the questions you might have about it. We'll go layer by layer. We'll take it slow, but we're going to get in very, very deep into ecotourism. This is a video series for Niagara, about Niagara right now. It's on the internet, so other people outside Niagara, they're going to watch these videos, probably. In 2023, I hope to have kind of finished this series on, how Niagara Falls gets from where it is to where we all want it to be. Right? And I hope that as a community we've come together, had some deep discussions, and started moving the ball forward. That's the end state I see at the end of 2023. I'm hoping, or at the end of 2022, I'm hoping we all look back on this year and say, we made a lot of progress, and we've overcome inertia. We're headed in the right direction, and we're feeling good about it. But moving right along, folks, let's get into this. It's like the recap segment, and we're going to be going into a Niagara Green Movement overview in this particular part. We're going to get into eBird and promoting Niagara, and how by promoting Niagara and eBird we're also helping the world. And we're going to take a look at the rough-legged hawk. I'll say one of my favorite hawks. I don't have an unfavorite hawk. Like, every hawk is my favorite for very different reasons. But we'll get to that later. Let's talk about how I see this Niagara Green movement. So what I've done is I've tried to create a structure, to explain the way I conceptualize this whole thing in my mind. And interestingly enough, our Canadian neighbors, Niagara Falls, Ontario, they have a green movement. It's ongoing. They've got like a whole team. They got a lot of stuff going on. They have a green movement. We can do better though, for sure, absolutely. So by the end of this year, let's look back on where we are, and let's take a look at where they are, and let's outgreen those Canadians. It's not hard for us. It really isn't. But honestly, when it comes to Niagara Falls, we're the greener side. We really are. And we need to start sharing that with the world. Let's jump down to that statement on the bottom, because it seems audacious. I know it sounds audacious. But I truly believe this, folks, and I'm hoping by the end of the series, you'll believe it too. It's not that hard to believe. Niagara Green Movement for us is about as a globally transformative approach. Globally transformative, not just local. All right, but it's a globally transformative approach for local economic growth using the pillars of ecotourism on a foundation of soil health. And that's kind of a mouthful, right? And I think there's a lot of concepts there that are a bit nebulous, abstract, and I want to make those concrete for everyone. So we're starting with this abstraction, and everyone's probably attaching different meanings, and they've had different experiences, and they've looked at this from different directions. But let's look at these 4 pillars. Conservation is, a core pillar for sure. And we've done a lot of conservation effort in Niagara County, and I don't think we ourselves realize just how much conservation effort's been done in recent years. If you think about it, the removal of the Robert Moses Parkway, which is a $40 million project, replaced with natural prairie, which really big. We'll get into soil health later. I'm going to be doing a whole segment just on that zone alone, and how much of a great thing that was, and now we need to build off of that. But if you go around the whole county, all right, Hyde Park also, within the city itself, many millions of dollars. The $40 million project, I don't know how much they spent in Hyde Park, but well over $1 million there too. There's several other little things. But I mean, you have it all over the county, ballparking probably $100 million in conservation efforts in the last few years alone. $100 million, did you know that? And we have to do some restoration. That's part of conservation, is restoration. We have a lot to restore in Niagara Falls. And us locals, we understand the daunting task with the brownfields and stuff like that. Education is a big part of ecotourism, and it should be a big part of the Niagara Green Movement. First, we've got to educate ourselves. We have to be smarter. And then we have to inject that education into policies and customs and practices in our own personal lives. And then we have to share that education and broader education of our natural history, our industrial history, and our restoration efforts. And someday in the far future, how we did restore things, right? Because that's the end state. Someday we're the greenest city on the planet, shining beacon, shining example to the rest of the world. This is how you live in an urban environment. This is how you integrate your rural neighbors into your urban environment. This is how you minimize human impacts on our other animal, wildlife brothers and sisters. And this is how you maintain a icon like Niagara Falls. Community. We have to come together as a community. That's kind of alluded to in these other two pillars, right? And they're all kind of integrated. They're all connected. They're connected from the soil to the top, to the roof of this Niagara Green Movement. We've got to have a discussion. We've got to start talking about this. We have different committees, that work for the city council. They've got to start thinking these things through. We have an environmental committee. I don't know what they're talking about. The rest of the community should know what they're talking about. We've got block clubs, that should be discussing some of these concepts and how they integrate that into their neighborhoods. There's so many different organizations. And then those different organizations got to start having relationships. There's going to be a lot of disagreement on, what's the next best right step to do, right? We have very limited resources, so we're going to have to prioritize them, So we've got to have that conversation. What criteria will we use to prioritize? Frankly, right now, we're just at a point like, should we even do this? Should we move down this path? But we got to do this community. And once we do that, once we pull together, once we start overcoming the inertia and really moving down this path in an organized, well-planned, deliberate way, and start seeing the results and start celebrating the results, that'll be fun as a community. I think that'll be grand fun. Once we get to that level, now we start with our, as good hosts for all the guests that we have annually in the city. We pull them into our community and we share that with them. We let them celebrate with us these accomplishments. There'll be small accomplishments at first, right? Like I planted a butterfly garden this year, and my first butterfly will be a big celebration for me, right? And I will share it with you. I'll be watching, and as soon as one lands on my butterfly garden, and I don't think it's going to be hard because the park's right across the street, and that new natural prairie, there were plenty of butterflies there last year, and I saw some floating around out here, and I don't even have good habitat around my building for butterflies. So I anticipate it won't be hard. But still, to do a butterfly garden and then to see butterflies in it will be a small, small victory, but one worthy of celebration. And we can all do these sorts of things. I'm not saying everyone rush out and do that. We all have our own context. We all have our own resource constraints. We all have a different yard, and our properties are at different levels. But as we come together as a community, I think there's a lot more we can accomplish. The other pillar is sustainment. And that's a big challenge and a big ethical question with every community that engages ecotourism as a economy builder. It's how do you sustain it, right? If you're super, super successful, if you're some small village in Colombia and goes down like the birding path, because they have extraordinary bird wealth. We have a lot of species, don't get me wrong, but not the numbers they have as far as variety. But ours are so easy to see. But down there in the village, if they achieve success year over year, they have more humans coming into an area that wasn't It's more pristine and more natural and hasn't been impacted by humans. And now they're trying to build more and more infrastructure to take care of those humans. And that's impacting that environment, right? And it's degrading that environment. It's removing habitat from those birds that are the whole reason people are coming. And so they've got to think through those issues. Otherwise, businesses will rush in, hotel builders will rush in, developers will rush in to try to capitalize off of that. In our case, we don't have that problem. That's why this is kind of a special place in a lot of ways. We've already impacted this. All we can do is decrease our impact. All right? I mean, we have, as an industrial city, an industrial area that's famous for some of the most egregious environmental catastrophes in human history, if not American history, we can only make it better. And we've already got our hotels. We've already got all that. And we're restoring the gorge, right? So we're reversing that. And that's part of what we share. That's part of what we should be already celebrating. But now how do we sustain that? That's one thing that's got to be part of our discussions moving forward. Why is this built on the foundation of soil health, though? We're going to get into this a little bit deeper in the next couple of slides. And what is soil health? What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about it being organic, regenerative, and resilient. How does that apply to soil health? I hear you. I didn't know any of this stuff a few months ago. Organic, like you hear people talking about organic foods and stuff, and that is what we're talking about. Not using fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers, not using herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides on our lawns. All right. Now, right now, we're just conditioned to do this. We think it's totally necessary, right? And we see all insects as pests. Well, no, there's only some insects that are pests. There's a lot of other insects that eat those. In fact, rule of thumb, for every insect species that truly is a pest because it is destructive to human needs, like a termite is destructive to if we build our buildings out of, like down in the South. I have a house in North Carolina. I got to watch that for termites. I got to keep termites out of there because we build with wood down there, but there's a lot of termites. Certainly insect infestation in your home, that's bad, right? And I don't care what the insect is, it shouldn't be in your house. But outside your house, like if you have a garden, you got aphids, well, that's bad. Aphids are bad. There's 1,700 predator species, right, that are beneficial and will get rid of the aphids for you. But when you use a pesticide, you kill those too. And what you have to learn and understand about plants, there's a hierarchy of plant health. And as a plant falls down that from healthiest to sickly, it becomes more and more vulnerable and more attractive to different pest species. So understanding how to keep your plant healthy, will help your plant defend itself because they have natural defenses. But we as humans, over the course of millennia, developed agricultural practices and developed this, conventional wisdom that's wrong. And we really reinforced it with all these human answers to things nature already has an answer to because of our misunderstanding. And that's part of the education process we need to go through. But that's kind of the organic side. Regenerative, what you come to understand is you move down this organic thing, you'll start to see we can regenerate soils. We used to think, because science went into areas where soil had been undisturbed and kind of look at the thickness of the soil there, and did carbon dating or whatever process they used to decide how old is this soil and how deep it is. And as they went around the world sampling this, they came up with like an average. And they're like, well, based on the age of all soils, it takes like anywhere from X years to Y years to grow an inch of topsoil. They're completely wrong. 100 years is what I've heard for an inch of topsoil. More recently, people said, well, it can be done in a decade, but it depends on where you are in the world. Well, what we are learning is if humans work with nature instead of against nature, we can regenerate soils very, very quickly. And without bringing in extra dirt or anything like that, just wherever there's dirt on this planet, it is just dirt. That dirt can be soil. And the difference between dirt and soil is life, right? And that's what we're going to get into. And that brings us into resiliency. Going down this path makes communities more resilient, makes the population living there engaging in these practices more resilient. The farmers who have gone down this path, their farms are more resilient. Their farms are way more profitable. They're competitive in yields, but they have way less inputs, right? And some of them are actually out yielding their more conventional tilling farmers who are using tons of inputs. But when you start using pesticides, you start killing that, right? And that degrades the soil. And when we talk about climate change, and we're always focused on the emissions side, right? But when we go down the policy path of trying to decrease emissions, we get into this argument, this tension, and this fight. But we need the energy to sustain what we have, and it's true. We should try to decrease emissions, But there's a huge sequestration is the other side of that coin, right? Even if we were to stop altogether putting CO2 in the atmosphere, there's still like 40 gigatons of CO2 we got to get out to reverse according to the climatologists, and this is debatable science. There's Nobel laureates say, the math's kind of wrong, right? But there is no doubt now. I had doubts years back, and I've visited the climate change issue several times, particularly from a mathematics standpoint, and I've dug into the science, and the correlation wasn't there to prove the emission side of the argument. And I think everyone's frankly been ignoring the sequestration side except for the people involved in the soil sciences. They really seem to get it, but no one's listening to them, and they're kind of talking to themselves, and we'll get in that later in the videos. But just a huge amount of resiliency going down this path. A lot of that sounds like agriculture rule stuff, and we're in an urban environment. What am I talking about? I can talk for hours, and I can take you there, but it's going to take hours, and I've got to build certain foundations of knowledge and introduce you guys to a lot of different things, right? So this will come out in layers and layers. So consider this a teaser, but there is a lot we can do in our urban environment that I think is life-changing, and it certainly changes the trajectory of our urban environment here in Niagara Falls. So ecotourism, let's look at that a little bit more. So it's a term that's been floating around the planet for years. Right, there's actually an international ecotourism society, and they're trying to promote this concept and some of those pillars, but this is how they define ecotourism: a responsible travel to natural areas that conserve the environment, sustains the well-being of the local people, and involves the interpretation and education. And that's, in a nutshell, you can kind of see those 4 pillars that I had in that previous graphic in that definition, right? You can see it here. They're focused on the business, so that's why they say education is meant to be inclusive of staff and guests. But I love this statement: ecotourism unites conservation, communities, and travelers. And that's the core thing we have to understand, is it's uniting all 3 of these things. And we have a community, we have travelers, and we have conservation, folks. We have all 3 of these things already. Have we united them, though? No, we haven't. Swear to God we haven't. Anyone who thinks we have, they're lying to themselves. Go down here and read these things for yourself. Pause the video as you'd like if you got distracted by my jibber-jabbering. How do I see ecotourism, though? And so now I'm kind of taking it from that more formal industry technical aspect and kind of breaking it apart for us. Ecotourism obviously is ecology plus tourism, right? So what's ecology? Ecology, well, eco actually means home. Ology means the study of home. For ecologists, it's more about the study of an organism's environment, which includes other organisms. So it's a much more holistic approach to a lot of, biology. Frankly, it's a lot to do with biology. But instead of looking at individual organisms, specializing in that, you're specializing in interaction of all the different organisms. And ecology is getting way better. It's really advancing, like practically in the dark, in secret, down here in the basement, right? We're all focused on the tech side of stuff. And ecologists, There's far more microbiology getting into it, and they're really looking below the soil, and it's amazing. I'm going to be introducing you guys to some of what I think are unsung heroes on this planet. And they're all over. Every continent has several of them. Every culture has several of them. They're leading the way. And I think they're ultimately going to save the planet. And I think that's the next big wave, right, is the green era. That's why I talk about the green revolution, is I see what these scientists are learning, the ramifications of their discoveries, right? The math side of what they're learning and its implications on climate change are extraordinary, right? And I think it creates an opportunity for all of us to come together on policies that will definitely slow the rate of climate change, if not eliminate climate change, and do so in a hugely quality of life changing way for humanity. And I think a lot of people who are activists, they're afraid to hear someone like me say that, or anyone say that, because they're so focused on emissions, and I think people ignore the emission side. No one's saying that, right? And that's the other thing, going down this path, I think it does lessen emissions, right? When you think about what it takes to produce all of those pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, right? That's part of our ecological damage in Niagara Falls. So they're chemical. What chemicals did they make, right? And I don't know. I'm planning on researching that and looking it up a little bit more, which actual chemicals. But at the end of the day, all those herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides are just chemical mixtures that, those processes chew up a lot of energy, which creates emissions and fossil fuel burning. Then distribute them a lot of fossil fuels to get it distributed. Then spreading it across farmland, more fuel, more emissions, right? The equipment necessary to do it, more emissions, more energy consumed. And then, as we'll learn later in much greater detail on the hows and whys, all that's causing drought. All that is causing drought. All that is causing soil erosion at rates that are natural. And it's because of what we do. And we don't have to do it that way. Going back to how I see ecotourism, the statement, these two lower bullet points is really what I want to cue on. Up in the definition, it talks about delivering the goods and services. And the goods and services include the food, shelter, transportation, entertainment, as well as opportunities to meet the provoking motivation, right? And why I'm saying that, because up in the definition, it talks about tourism as a business of providing goods and services, right? Well, you got to understand, we have to understand goods and services as a tourism-based economy. And we do, kind of in an abstract, nebulous way, but no one really thinks about it in a concrete way. So we know, but we're always begging for, we need more entertainment. We need more entertainment. We need more entertainment. Right? But what you're supposed to be providing the tourist is supposed to be in the context of what provoked them, what motivated them to come to that destination. Right? And you've heard me in other videos, even in my first series over a year ago, complain about this need for other things to do, and how we have so many things to do, and how if people wanted to go to a family playground, they go to Disney World or Disneyland or Six Flags. If they want to go to an adult playground, they go to like Vegas. If they want to go to a theater district, for live shows and plays, either Vegas or Broadway. But if they want nature, they go to a natural destination. Now, plenty of people who enjoy all those things also choose Niagara Falls, but remember, they chose it, they knew, and they came expecting nature. Now, when the sun goes down and they want to relax after walking all day in nature, they probably do want some entertainment, and that is a way to monetize and pull money into our local economy by providing entertainment. But you first better meet their nature expectations, right? And we can do that way, way better. And we'll chew up more time. And even if they don't find entertainment the first couple of years, because we're building up to that, they're going to enjoy it better. They're going to want to come back and see some of the results of some of these conservation efforts that we showed them. You want to come back in a different season and see how it looks in a different season. And season by season, we got to feed the next season. Last bullet down there in blue, ecotourism is better understood when viewed as the business of providing goods and services to travelers, studying the interaction of life with natural environment at the destination. Right? So we pulled the ecology and the tourism together, and we understand that there's study involved in this. Right? Learning, the education pillar. But we got to educate ourselves first. And so I'm going to cut it there. And I want to switch it up, and I want to get to the rough-legged hawk. Hey everyone, you're looking at a very horrible photo of a very beautiful bird, the rough-legged hawk. In the beginning of the video, I told you that the rough-legged hawk was one of my favorites, and I don't have an unfavorite hawk. But why is it one of my favorites? What's special about the rough-legged hawk to me personally is this was literally one of the first, if not the first, bird photos I took back when I decided to commit to bird photography. I was doing landscape. I was trying to do a better job. I always felt like the Niagara Falls landscape was poorly captured, poorly portrayed. Lots of photos of the waterfall, but there's so much more that you just don't see, exhibited very often at all when we talk about Niagara Falls, when you see it on the internet, when it's in a documentary or anything else like that. Whirlpool State Park and the Niagara Gorge, and particularly in the fall when it's just a blaze of color. So I was out there doing landscape photography, but the lens I had was a landscape lens, a more wide-angle lens. And there was always birds around. And particularly when I was doing sunrises on the upper river, I'd see birds flying in, as the sun was rising, ducks particular, but at quite a distance. And that, wide-angle lens just wasn't cutting it to get a bird photo. So, I started researching telephoto lenses and what kind of reach do I need? What do I need to capture a good bird photo? What is a good bird photo? And finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get a lens, and I ran to Best Buy. Looking for a rather specific lens, a 400 millimeter. They didn't have it. What they did have was this lens, and I don't regret getting this lens. It's a 28 to 300 millimeter, and it's a bit faster on the low end, the wider angle side, but it's a 5.6 at the 300 millimeter. And I got this, and I ran out with it out front, in front of the building here right on the Niagara Gorge, and looking around, just aiming it, trying to get a feel for the camera. It was a cloudy day, so it wasn't a lot of light, so I had to have the shutter speed quite a bit slower. And this guy came flying overhead. I could tell it was a hawk. It was pretty high altitude. This photo's cropped in a little bit, so you see a lot of noise in the photo. And so a little bit of bird photography 101. You obviously have to have reach, so you want a longer lens. You want to have high shutter speeds. That means you're going to use highest ISOs when you have poor lighting conditions to compensate for the low aperture, right? So you have basically a triangle of three variables with photography to control your exposure: your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. So this guy's flying overhead really high, and I took a few shots, and that's the kind of grainy darkness in the wings, and the fact that it's not crisp and detailed. That's the noise. And then if you look around the edges, of the wings and the tail, you see a bit of a blur there. That's motion blur because of the slower shutter speed and the noise from the high ISO. But I got a photo, and I didn't know what it was. I brought it back. I'm like, what specifically is this bird? And I'm looking more at the birds that are local, and like, man, this pattern doesn't match. And just like I've had to do with a lot of birds, I had to turn to the birding community, and it was Rachel Wilson that happened to be Joel Strong, the birder that I'll refer to often. We'll see some stuff from him in a minute. And she was the first one. Like, oh, Jeff, that's probably a rough-legged hawk. I'm like, okay, well, what is that? What's so special about it? And it is a special bird, folks. It is a very special bird. So let's take a look at just how special the rough-legged hawk is. Now, I've showed you eBird. Now I'm showing you all about birds. It's also done by Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It's a whole separate website that really gives you more specific education on the birds, right? So eBird is us feeding data to Cornell. The All About Birds is like Cornell returning information to us. It has quite a few of the same features. I want to give you guys an overview of this resource too, particularly anyone who is kind of getting interested in birding and learning more about them. All About Birds is a good place to start. And the last time I went into eBird with the egrets, I was showing you stuff and I was kind of hunting around. And watching the video myself, I'm like, yeah, I look kind of stupid, but I know why I look stupid. Because I was looking for particular pieces of information in eBird that aren't there. They're in All About Birds, right? So let's look at that. Kind of the same thing like eBird gives you an overview. They give you this basic description, and then you could just click on more ID info. And it'll give you more photos of it too. And same thing like eBird does. It'll give you species that you might confuse it with. I'm always impressed because they do a much better job, I think, on this site of giving you some of the best photos of these birds. And frankly, I get jealous. And I've done just like I've researched a lot of ecology and a lot of climate change and all that stuff. When I first started bird photography, I went deep in learning how you do it, what makes for a good bird photo, and all the experts on the planet, all the very renowned bird photographers, and they all have their own YouTube websites and stuff where you can watch their videos and they're giving you tips and tricks and obviously promoting their own photography, and you're just like, wow, will I ever take a photo that good? But none of this is really telling you why the rough-legged hawk is so special to me, aside from being the first one I took. But then, as I started exploring and researching this bird, let's go over to eBird now and look at this bird from an eBird perspective. All right, so looking at the rough-legged hawk through eBird, I just like their range map a little bit better because it really shows you the observation density. That other one's more of a scientific extrapolation. Like I said, All About Birds is Cornell returning information to the public. eBird is public feeding them information. And so here the range map really shows us the observation density, where humans are seeing the bird. Now, if you remember the egret, there were over 3 million observations of the egret. Globally, the rough-legged hawk only has 300,000 observations. Remember, the egret had like 300 and some thousand photos that have been submitted to eBird. Rough-legged hawk only has 25,000. And as you see here, the darker, more intense observations have been, way up north, because that's where this bird lives. It's a lot like the snowy owl. To me, it has the same color pattern. It's colored like a bird that lives in the Arctic tundra to blend in with the Arctic tundra environment, just like the snowy owl. Also like the snowy owl, we're only going to see this hawk in the winter in our area. And like the snowy owl, every bird doesn't migrate every single year. Some of them just stay up there the whole winter in the Arctic tundra. So it kind of reminds me of humans, particularly humans that live here in Western New York. We usually tough it out in the winter, but every once in a while, like, you know what, I'm not doing it this year. I'm going to spend a significant portion of this winter in a warmer climate like Florida, right? That's why Florida has that snowbirder phrase to It's what they call us northerners when we're hanging out down there in January. I mean, it's 3 degrees outside right now. I wish I was in Florida. But again, looking at the range map, you see those darker, intenser areas up north, and that's because you're highly likely to see the bird way up there, but there's very few people up there to see them. That's why when you look across Asia, no one lives that far north in Asia. So if we were to really zoom in and see where the human populations are, you're going to see those human populations correlate to these dark dots up at top. Because that's a concept I want everyone to really understand as I keep expanding this story and keep going further and further in depth with the audience about human observation and the eBird platform. When we look at these range maps and we look at this data over here, the statistics, it's not necessarily an accurate depiction of that bird's population, that bird's distribution, where that bird's hanging out at any given time. It's really a depiction of human observation. Point blank, it's human observation. You got to be able to distinguish the difference between bird population and true bird counts and true bird study, right? This is what we would call in research a proxy metric. All right, it's not a direct metric of the bird population. You know, who knows how many rough-legged hawks there actually are on Earth? No one does, because it's impossible to go out and count. There might be hundreds of thousands. Penguins recently, right? I think it was satellite imagery, I forget, or maybe it was a high-altitude overflight. But they discovered like 100,000 penguins living very deep in the continent, away from the shore where they wouldn't expect penguins to be. And that practically doubled the population. I don't know if it practically doubled, I forget what portion, but it significantly increased what we thought the populations of penguins were on Earth, discovering this monstrous, what do you call them, a flock? I'd call them a herd, the way penguins, particularly when they're far away from water. But how fascinating. But it also should remind us that we don't know what we don't know. And humans aren't everywhere all the time to record such stuff. And even where there are humans record such stuff, they aren't necessarily recording it. And that's another issue we're going to dig into about our own personal bird wealth in Niagara County. I don't think the eBird data accurately depicts it. You know, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it does. You know, but I think relative to other areas, when I look at the data set for us and I look at a data set for other areas, I don't think it does. Simply, Erie County, you know, they have like a dozen more species that have been observed there, but they also have like 10 times the observers observing than we have in Niagara County. So I got a feeling that with more birders in Erie County looking, of course they've noticed more of the species diversity that they have there, and it's been inputted. So enough on that, but back to the rough-legged hawk. And I want to dig into one of the ways we, as just normal residents living in the city, can help promote our bird wealth without even birding, is going into eBird and checking out the photos. All right, so here's the top photos that have been taken of the rough-legged hawk across the planet. You can see down here in the little right-hand corner, this one by Jerry Liguori. I'm not sure how you say his name, but he took this photo in Farmington Bay Wildlife Management Area in Utah. Here's another one that was taken in Ohio. Now, if we were to go and look at things from a Niagara County perspective, let's go to my eBird. Let's go into species observed. All right, like I said, if not the first bird photo I took, certainly among one of the first, and it's my first, chronologically, my first input into eBird was my rough-legged hawk. All right, and now this is showing us the rough, because we're going into my stuff, and it's, and I'm a Niagara County birder. These statistics now, you saw the global statistics a second ago, but now we're looking at Niagara County statistics, right? In eBird, there's only been 134 observations of the rough-tailed hawk in Niagara County, 20 of them with photos. All right. And like I said, we're only going to see it in the winter, right? Looks like there's been an observation in June, but you don't see it July, August, September. There's been some observations of it in in October. And then quite a few during the winter season, because that's when they're passing by, and some of them will stay here all winter long. They just come in our area, and this is where they're summering. It's like the Miami of the rough-tailed hawk, just like it's the rough-legged hawk. And why is it called the rough-legged hawk? Did you know? I didn't know. Now I do. It's because this particular species has feathers all the way down its leg to its talon, whereas most species, the feathers don't go all the way down to the talon. There's only like four birds of prey in North America that have that particular feature, and that the feathers go all the way down to the talons. So a little bit of trivia. Now, out of the 20 photos that have been submitted to eBird out of Niagara County, Joel Strong has one, and let's look at his. What a great photo. What a great photo. Now look over here, you have quality ratings, right? And there's been only 2 ratings on Joel's photo. Everyone rates it pretty high. I mean, is it perfect? For the distance he got that at, and I mean, Joel has a pretty good lens. I've seen his camera. I haven't used it or questioned it, but he's got a nice long lens. It's a good telephoto. It's at least a 400, if not a 500 or 600 millimeter. And I mean, the bird's looking directly at him. Cute cock to the head. Very clear. Very little noise. Certainly no motion blur. So he got his shutter speed right. But going back to this quality rating, this is one of the ways we can help promote our own birds. When you look at New York State from a birding perspective in eBird, you're going to see the top media. Now the top media are top media because the computer chose them as the top media, not because the computer went and judged the photo. It's kind of more like Facebook, YouTube kind of stuff. The more humans who saw the photo and gave it a rating and rated it higher, the more points it gets, and the more the algorithm chooses that as top media and puts that there. So if I'm a foreigner and I'm going to be visiting New York State and traveling across the state, and I'm looking at eBird data, and I see different species, and I keep seeing the top photos, and the top photos are always Suffolk County. I'm thinking, I only need to go to Suffolk County if I really want to get those shots. Even though it's probably easier to get more great bird photos here in Niagara County, just because of the way our habitats work and the landscapes and these distances that we can see. Oops, sorry, we don't need that popping up on the screen. The point is, because there's millions, hundreds of thousands, I forget how many Suffolk County has, but they have a lot of people looking, and they're taking a lot of photos and putting them in there. And the other people in that county are also looking at their county data set a lot more frequently and seeing the good photos and rating those. So they're going to the top of New York State's media. And here in Niagara County, where we only have a handful of birders, and even only a small portion of them on any given day have gone through and seen the new photo submitted, and maybe or maybe not click on the photo and give it a rating, it never makes it to the top. So we're under promoted because we've got a very small population of birders. But everyone in Niagara Falls, everyone in Niagara County, frankly, can go into eBird and, on a somewhat regular basis, go in and rate the quality. Just click on this and you're like, okay, what do I think it is? Frankly, I think, I want to give them a 5. I really do. We're going to give them 4 like everyone else. As well, we saw the other bird photos from All About Birds and some of the ones at the national level, and they were a bit better. So can't quite put it to that. But now he's got 3 ratings, right? He's still at a 4. Now let's go back and look at some of the other. This one's rough. It's dark. It's perched. It's nice, but again, they're visiting in the winter. We're going to have gray skies. We're going to have lighting issues. It's very challenging. I totally understand. This one's sharp, but it's dark and you can't pick up many details. You can't see its eye. I like that it's sharp. I'm going to give him a 3 also. All right. Oh, one's way better. I kind of want to give it a 4. Much closer, and love it that he's looking at me. I'm giving it it's not quite. I kind of want to lower the other rating. This still isn't like as good as Joel's, but what the heck. Oh, this was nice, but it's flying away. And bird photographers in particular, we had this kind of shot. We're always trying to get eye contact with our birds in our photos. But what I do like is how, the identifying, what they call the field marks of this bird are so obvious in this photo. I think it's certainly better than one that I just rated as a 3. I don't like it as a quality, but I'm certainly not going to give him a lower rating than he already has. So we'll go with the 3. But anyone can do this, folks. All you got to do is do an eBird account and particularly explore by Niagara County, see what's happening each day, and take some time to go ahead and rate the quality of other people's photos. Right? And I don't do it enough. This is as good as that one, even one. I'm still giving it a 3. Part of me, it's because I understand the challenge. I want to give these people extra credit for just getting the capture. That's slightly better than mine, which I would give a 1. This is interesting. Very interesting how the photographer captured this. Who did capture this? Oh, it's Joel's. It must have been in motion. He must have been panning with it or something. But a lot of blur. Or maybe it was just on a very light twig. And that's another thing about the rough-legged hawk that I read about is, unlike other birds of prey, they'll land on like the lightest of things. You'll see when I get to the red tail how my red tails are always. There's a variety of things that they perch on, but you'll see my perched red tails are always on a really obviously sturdy branch. It's this whatever it just grabbed onto the top of looks like it's maybe the thickness of its own leg. That's crazy thin. You would expect to see like a house sparrow perched on something like that. So it's probably blowing in the wind, and that's why and he's probably panning with it. Maybe, I don't know. I'll have to ask Joel, his experience with this capture. That motion blur is really interesting to me. All right. So we've gone as far that way as we can. Let's go back the other way. God, I love that one. I love that photo. All right. This isn't a 4 to me. And it's not the photographer's fault either in a lot of cases. The birds are flying where they're flying. You can only do as well as you can under the conditions that God, nature, and the bird granted you that day. But it's just so high up, you really can't see much detail. There's got to be more photos in this. Let's view all of the photos. All right, so these ones, they're on the top. And that's what's interesting too. Oh my God, look at this one. Yeah, we didn't see this one. So what's her name? Irina Shulgina. Let's look at your photo. Oh, it's at quite a distance, so she's cropping in quite well, but I love the details. She had good light that day. Probably morning light or evening light. It's what we call good light in photography. That's a good photo. It's only been rated once at a 2. I'm going to give that a 3. I like it. All right, let's go back this direction, folks. Ugh. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, Joe, for this one. This is one of those times that if I got that photo, I can see why they said you might confuse it with a northern harrier. I mean, that's just northern harrier habitat. Northern harrier. At this distance, I'm not seeing any field marks, and yeah, I might have mistook it. I don't know how it was flying that day, and if it's, I've only seen them soaring high personally, so yeah, might have got that. And that's also Joel's bird. Stick with the two on that one. Joel again. I mean, it's obviously the same sequence of photos, but good for him. Ooh. Do you like the positions? Would have been great if better light that day if he had been closer. But again, you got to work with the conditions you're given. Looks like Joel's gotten to see this bird more than once, though. Joel again. Definitely looks like on a different day. Really horrible photo. Sorry, Joel, giving you one. Also one on that one. Oh, that's nice. Also Joel. Yeah, who gave that a 2? I like it. That's just a beautiful bird. I just love the markings. I love the colorings. Again, I'm a colorblind, so these black and white birds like the rough-legged hawk and the snowy owl. All right, we've seen that. We've seen these ones. We're going to go back the other direction, folks. But you see what I'm doing, right, folks? And you see how this would help promote Niagara County. We need more people to rate these things. You don't have to be a birder. You don't have to be a bird photographer to rate these things. Yeah. It's a horrible one. James Johnston. Gosh, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, he did a pretty good job. A little bit of motion blur, just a tiny bit back on the wings, but look at the front. That's so clear. And no one's rated this photo. No one has rated this photo yet because no one goes in and looks. That's sad. This is I'm giving this one a 5. That's really nice. I mean, could it be better? Sure could, but holy moly. Oh, another one, probably the same bird, same day. No one's rated it though, ever. Certainly a 4. Nice. Also James Johnson. No one's rated it. Wow. Oh, look at that. Now we got the eye. Oh, this is Joel too. Nice job, Joel. Oops, sorry. Alarm for something else. Nice job. No one's rated this photo of Joel's yet. Definitely give me a 4 right off the bat. I mean, it's got some noise and there's a little bit of motion blur. Captured the eye. Again, it's not easy, particularly in a cloudy day, to get that level of detail, that level of sharpness. And I tend to overrate bird photos. Again, I'm not that judgmental of bird photos like I would be a landscape or architectural photo or even a person photo, just because, I mean, particularly if you have a model, right? You have all the time in the world and you can tell the human what to do and you can look at it and retake the photo. So if you had a poor exposure, take it again. You only get one shot with the birds, generally, folks, and then it's gone. What can you do? Also, Joel's. Still gonna get that a 4. He's getting some Christmas. This series is nice. Oh, it's circled around for you, didn't it, Joel? I can tell because you had it going that way in the frame. Now you got to go this way in the frame. I doubt he flipped the exposure. You could do that to make it look like something else, but wow, nice. And no one's rated it. I'm giving it a 4 too. You got eye contact. So great. Ooh, look at this. Looking down on you. I mean, that looks like it was probably nearly the altitude that I took my bird photo. But look, they got more light that day. It allows you to have a faster shutter speed, which means you don't get, you can have your aperture wider open. You don't have to crank up your ISO. It's an easier capture is what I'm saying because of the light. But it's still a great capture, and so I got to give that one a 5. That might be mine. It is mine. Right, so here I didn't do anything. I didn't blow up in frame. This is like literally, no post-processing anything. That's what it looks like through the lens. And I've only had one opportunity. I mean, I clicked off quite a few photos of that bird flying high. That's crap. Like, you wouldn't even, like, that could be a turkey vulture for all we know, from this photo. So it's a 1. I mean, now it's not a turkey vulture because of that head. You can see the head. And this is just how small in frame these things are when you're originally taking them. And then in post, you crop down in and blow it up as much as you can without pixelating the bird. But, what is it? I don't know. So, but no one's rated my birds either. This is a little bit better. You get more wing markings and stuff. Now, not cropping in, if we cropped in, we would probably see motion blur around the edges of the wings and the tail. But at least this one, I think we get a better idea that it's a rough-legged hawk. Now, here's where those other ones where you see the bird's much smaller, and here it's much larger in frame, but that's because I've cropped down in and made it larger so that you can identify it. And then you get all the motion blur and it's kind of crappy. So that's how we do it, folks. This is Joel. And kind of the same thing. No one's rated him yet. Oh, that's amazing. Look at that. I might have mistaken that for red tail, except the tail's not red. But, my color blindness, this coloring up here looks exactly like a red tail color to me. But, man, perch, strong, eye contact, bit noisy, but fuck, I'm giving it a 5. Oh, even better. 5. Oh, kind of like this. I like that wing position. It looks like its talons are down. It's dropping down. It's such a classic bird of prey behavior. But he's so high, I can't believe his talons are down. Why is his talons down? Just Joel too. Joel, if you see, you got to tell me your rough-legged hawk stories. You got to share them with me, and maybe we'll have him on sometime. Oh, this is horrible. Sorry, Phyllis. It looks. It's like she took it through a screen. So that's definitely messing up. Maybe it was with a phone camera because that's all she had at the time. I mean, you can definitely tell though it's a rough-legged hawk. I mean, I would certainly good enough to identify it. Certainly worth a 2. She's using the camera she has. She's using the tool she has. And there's no reason for anyone not to. Oh, but I like this. And that's also Phyllis. So this is good. The bird came in closer. You really got it. It's certainly better than mine. Definitely putting you up to a 3 there. And that's the end of them. So, because I only have one rough-legged hawk photo series and one observation to share with you guys, I really wanted to take this opportunity to show you how we can all help promote our bird wealth through the eBird platform to do it. And backyard birders, it's a lot easier, even with like the smaller lens like this one. I mean, this is perfect. This isn't great for going up on the upper river and trying to get the geese and ducks that are way out there, and it certainly isn't good for me to stand on the cliff here in the gorge looking down at the birds. I got to use the bigger lens to get those shots. And I mean, since I got the bigger lens, I practically never use this one for anything other than landscapes. Sometimes I carry it with me like a pistol, like that's the rifle, this is the pistol, just in case a little chickadee gets really close. And then that lens becomes better. It's a much sharper lens, actually. It's a much higher quality optics than I find. Less chromatic aberration, a lot of other technical stuff that I like about that 300 millimeter. But going back to backyard birders, and I'll give a shout out to William Hamilton Sr. I mean, everyone probably knows Ken Hamilton. He's a bit more common name in town because he used to write for the Gazette. He's been on the radio a lot. So, and he's always active in the community, goes to the council meetings and speaks his piece quite often. So we all know Ken Hamilton, but his cousin, William, he's a backyard birder, has feeders, takes photos all the time. And if you're listening, Ken, I'm sorry, if you're listening, Will, I hope you have an eBird account, and I hope you start doing at least a backyard bird list, and that'll really be cool for you moving forward, seeing like what different birds are visiting you at different times of year and stuff, and you'll be adding to the data for Niagara County. And a lens like this in a backyard situation, when you got feeders, you'll get some incredibly sharp photos. I mean, it's not as expensive as the 500, but I mean, compared to what it is in the 500 millimeter, it is a pricing lens. I think it's like a brand new out of the box 700. And of course, you got to have a DSLR to attach it to. But going back to backyard birding, folks, it's another way for you to participate and promote bird wealth here in Niagara Falls. And too many people think, well, I live in the city. Well, in this city, it's amazing. I just walked 2 blocks to the gas station yesterday, and no one's going to be impressed by house sparrows, but there was probably 200. They were clustered and all along Pine Street between 3rd and Main Street. And noisy, loud, making lots of noise, and just every bush, 20 of them, up in trees. So it was like a whole huge flock. We have a large population of those right in this zone, but some other flock must have decided to descend on us and visit their buddies. Rough-legged hawk, folks. Rough-legged hawk, eBird, all about birds. Make an eBird account and start to get familiar with it. Look at the photos that get submitted on each day. Give your judgment, right? And when someone captures something great, give them the credit they deserve, right? And that just motivates them too. And it motivates all of us to do a better job. We need critique. When I do a crappy bird photo, like my rough-legged hawk photo, well, be honest, it's not a good photo. It doesn't hurt my feelings, right? And as I start to get more confident and I start to think, oh, this is the greatest photo ever, probably isn't, right? And that's what looking at the professionals' photos really makes me a lot harder on myself. That's why anyone who wants any of my photos, you just email me, call me, message me, put a comment in the video, say I'd like that photo. I will give it to you for free. I'll email a digital copy. You can do whatever you want with it, because none of them are award-winning photos. I'm getting good. I'm getting better, but I don't think I'll ever be a pro. I don't have the time to do that kind of practice. I don't have the money to get a $10,000 lens. Not that you need a $10,000 lens to be a professional, but it certainly helps. And until the next video, when we'll be talking about the sharp-shinned hawk instead of the rough-legged hawk we just talked about. Be inspired. Be inspired, Niagara. Thanks.